Hello, welcome to Manchester is Red, the Manchester United podcast brought to you by the Manchester Evening News. Of course, a quick reminder at the start of this podcast, you can get us now on YouTube as well. Search the Manchester is Red podcast on there if you want to see it as well as hear it. I'm your host, Rich Fay, and on today's show, we'll look back at United's weekend win over Wolves, look ahead to the match against Bournemouth on Tuesday night, and we'll also take a look at the January transfer window, which is now a relevant topic of discussion considering it is open. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by two men who haven't overslept their alarms, at least it doesn't look like it. Samuel Luckhurst, Tyrone Marshall, how are you both doing?
Yep, very well, thank you, Rich, very well.
Yes, good. Thank you, Rich. Good. As Samuel can probably attest to, we no longer need actual alarms. Unfortunately, I was woken on New Year by the alarm that sleeps in the other room in this house, so that was particularly painful. I would love the chance to oversleep.
Well, there's no sleep on you two today because we've got a lot to get through. Wolves at the weekend, you were both there at Molineux. Another gritty but good win for United. They're making a habit of winning when they've not necessarily had a complete performance. But Samuel, let's start with you. Was a deserved 3 points, I thought.
Yeah, you could tell just from the scenes in the dugout just before full time and at full time how important a win that was for United. It's always a slugfest at Wolves. Those games, they either end in a draw or a win by one goal. I think that in the last 12 games they've played each other, that's what it's come down to, whether it's at Old Trafford or at Molineux. Mercifully, it was the first game between them in, I think, 362 days, when at the start of 2020 they played each other three times in 32 days. It really was becoming overkill, United Wolves fixtures. But United could have made it easier for themselves. They had at least two excellent chances in the first half, but goals are hard to come by. I think the fact that Rashford was on the bench was pretty telling in that internal disciplinary that United declined to specify. It couldn't have been that bad because he was present and then he was summoned as soon as the start of the second half. Took his goal very well, but I'm sure we'll come on to it. There are still fundamental issues with the attack, even though United are still winning. But Tottenham's result against Aston Villa, to a lesser extent Newcastle dropping points, because I think everyone knows that Newcastle are going to fall away at some point. I'm not, undermining Eddie Howe there or trying to say that he's not doing as good a job as he is doing, because he is. But nobody expects them to finish in the top four. They've done phenomenally well to be in the top four as long as they have done. But that, and even City, the fact that City are only 4 points clear of United as well, again, it just accentuates the importance of that win over Wolves. And as you say, it was another gritty victory. A lot of United's wins in the Premier League this season have been by the odd goal. That is a good habit to have. They do need to develop that habit of winning games much more easily, similar to the Forest game, which was still a game they should have scored more goals in. And if they can get that reinforcement in this month to really bolster the attack, and you even saw the impact that Igalo had coming in that it actually helped Marshall out and that they could rest Marshall for certain midweek games and he'd do well in the league games at the weekend. So that is still vital, but the fact that they are fourth, that they're in good form, they've won their last five, I think it's only one defeat in 14 now under Ten Hag. It's been another progressive week for them, and it's been a very, very good start since the World Cup.
Of course, like you said there, brilliant that United can be in a healthy position and we've still got lots of room for them to improve in. We've still got saying they can do this, they can do that. So it is really healthy in that regard. And like you said, the top four fight for it as well. United do have a clear advantage there, and they've got this game in hand still to be played as well. Ty, should we tackle the Rashford issue now? I mean, I think it's been dealt with superbly by Ten Hag. The player knew it wasn't acceptable to miss the meeting. He responded with a goal. They both said after the game, that's it, the situation's done now. But it must be brilliant for United fans that they have got this authoritative figure in charge of the club, and that discipline really is of importance now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the most important the most important person at that club is now the one in the technical area, and that's probably not been the case for a little while. At United, there's been no shortage of player power and a feeling that it's been a divided dressing room, one where people are pushing the boundaries. Things just haven't really been working with regard to that dressing room. But Ten Hag has instilled authority. like we're saying, that's 3 players now that he's basically disciplined and given a not necessarily public dressing down, but has made them aware of the standards expected. We have Garnacho on tour, obviously Ronaldo with the Tottenham refusing to come on, and now Rashford. I mean, the only error in amongst all of that, I think, was making Ronaldo captain again 18 days after refusing to come on. But beyond that, the way he dealt with it initially was excellent. The way he dealt with Rashford was good. Like I say, it was given what he'd done with Ronaldo and Garnacho, it was never going to be the biggest misdemeanor to still be on the bench and oversleeping for a team meeting. I mean, it's not great. It's not disastrous. Rashford seemed to accept the punishment in his broadcast interviews afterwards, while also kind of making the point himself that he didn't think it was necessarily the worst thing he could have done. But these are the standards you set, and that kind of discipline, that kind of authority, it can translate onto the pitch. And when you let discipline slide it off the pitch, it can often slide on the pitch, and you see that with a lot of managers who lose their power and lose their authority. So, it worked out perfectly for him in the end that he could drop him, he could bring him on after 45 minutes. He did score the goal that won the game. At half time, you were kind of, I think at half time in the press box and probably everywhere else, the conversation we were having was Rashford would have scored that chance that Garnacho got. And in the end, it proved irrelevant because Rashford did come on and score. And I mentioned in one of the pieces that you don't often see that much emotion from Ten Hag on the touchline, but he really did celebrate that goal quite enthusiastically. And I think there was a bit of that probably where he realised sort of how, it was a perfect day in a way for him, that he showed his authority. Rashford still came on and scored, keeps his fine run of form going, and they got, like Samuel said, the win, one that wasn't pretty. It felt on 70 minutes like it was going to be goalless, but they've got an in-form attacker playing at the top of his game in their side, and like Samuel touched on before, winning breeds winning, and they are winning games at the moment and finding ways to win games that they don't necessarily deserve. And I think I said on the drive home that was a game where it was very similar to a lot of the United Wolves games recently, but if that was a Ranić or a Solskjaer United team, I don't think they'd have won that game. They'd have probably drawn it 0-0 because Wolves never looked like scoring, but it's almost that belief that winning games gives you, that you will just find a way to win it, and it becomes almost self-perpetuating, really, that you win games and then you keep finding a way to win games even when you don't necessarily deserve it. And I think they did deserve it on Saturday, but for a long time in the second half it did look like it wasn't going to come, and it wasn't like they were creating loads of chances, but they did find a way.
Of course, we've mentioned, and we probably will mention again in a minute, about United's bluntness up front and the lack of goals. Samuel alluded to earlier, there are still missed opportunities, and on another day United could have won that by a more comfortable margin, but you only need to score one goal if you're not letting any in at the other end. It's now 9 clean sheets in United's last 12 games. Samuel, how impressed have you been with that defensive transformation? Because United are the informed defensive team in the Premier League, and it's been done with a makeshift back four as well.
It has gone under the radar a little how miserly they've been at home in the league, and that they've not conceded a home league goal since Saka equalised for Arsenal, and that was at the very start of September. I think one fan he came up with the stat about Varane and how few goals United have conceded with him on the pitch this season. He actually said after the Wolves game that United have literally not conceded a goal with Varane and Casemiro on the pitch. And when you consider those are the two players who Ten Hag has probably spoken about most reverentially, it's not a surprise whatsoever. Those two both have an aura about them. They're both serial winners. It was interesting during that stoppage in the second half that Ten Hag, I can't remember, it might have been Cunha who went down injured, but Ten Hag called Casemiro over, and it was only Casemiro to read some instructions that he was showing on his little tactics binder, or I think it was a tactics board. It looked like one of those travel games that you take away when you're going on a long journey and kids play in the back of the car. But the fact that he's talking to Casemiro when there are other players far nearer, I think Rashford was nearer to him, Malacia would have been nearer to him, but it was Casemiro who he wanted to talk to, just speaks volumes of Casemiro's presence on the pitch. He is pretty much the on-pitch lieutenant for Ten Hag. Varane didn't put a foot or a head wrong all afternoon. It felt like every ball that went in the area, he seemed to nod it away, with maybe the exception, and it would have massively undermined his performance had Jimenez put that chance in at the end. That was maybe the only lapse. But Varane had a very good debut there last season against Wolves, when I think he just got caught out the one occasion when Saiss had that header where he should have scored, and De Gea made a great save on the follow-up. But Varane, for someone who very, very briefly in the summer was United's fourth choice centre back, there have not been three better centre backs than him in on the planet this season. He's been immense for United more often than not. It's not a coincidence that the goal glut at City started after he got injured. He was off the pitch for the second goal. The third goal, which was world-class cross from De Bruyne, world-class finish from Haaland. But he wasn't at his optimum then, so you have to factor that into it as well. It seems like anyone who plays with him becomes better, and Shaw has done very well as a centre-half in a back three. He's done exceptionally well as a centre-half in the back two in recent games. Yes, it's been against teams who've been in the relegation zone, and Wolves are a very blunt side. It's still pretty peculiar that however much they've progressed and developed in recent years, they still can't quite identify a striker who can score them 50 to 20 goals this season. Jimenez was a decent striker before he had that terrible injury, unfortunately. But still, when the team sheet dropped and we saw that Shaw was playing at centre back again and Diego Costa was starting, you'd think, well, Costa might be licking his lips here. There was an early examination of Shaw, passed it with flying colours, didn't look back. Costa was off at half time. And in fairness as well, at fullback, Wan-Bissaka's had a few decent performances. He obviously got the assist in the game against Burnley. He's not done too much in an attacking sense since then, but I don't think he's ever going to. Defensively, when he's on it, he's excellent. It's been a long time since he has been excellent defensively. He certainly wasn't last season, and there were a lot of issues the season before that as well, with him getting caught out with balls over his head to the far post, and he was misjudging things. But I think the way it's going now, it would be a surprise if United were to let him go, because he's part of that 8 band of defenders that you need in a squad. You need 2 right backs, 2 left backs, 4 centre backs, and now that he's actually playing games, there is a little bit of competition there for Diogo Dalot.
Speaking of competition then, Ty, Harry Maguire did come on towards the end, made an important contribution right at the end as well that maybe he won't get as much credit for that he deserves, but his future at the club, the fact that Luke Shaw is playing at centre-back, Ten Hag said after the game that he likes having the left-footed centre-back there. He said that all summer since Martin has signed anyway, that he likes to have those extra angles and it helps with the way that they orchestrate from the back. But for Maguire now, is it time that he really does have to consider his future at the club, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a scenario that's probably not sustainable for the long term. It does feel. I mean, he's not going to want to be fourth choice, and he quite clearly is at least fourth choice. And if you're only playing left footers, if you're Martinez and Shaw are your left footed options, then you're looking at Varane, Lindelof, and Maguire on the right. I mean, he's not going to get a lot of games, and he did win those 2 defensive headers in the same move, basically, for that corner that you mentioned in there. But that's kind of what he thrives on. That's why he's good for England. It's his best game for United this season, maybe the whole of last year, was against West Ham when they won 1-0 at Old Trafford, when they were terrible in the second half, and they just dropped deeper and deeper and deeper to defend, and it became a case of defend 18-yard line, even 12 yards out. And Maguire was brilliant because it was head it, kick it, get rid of it, and he's strong in that. He's a good defender in that situation. When he's got to defend the halfway line, when he's got to defend one-on-one, it's probably not his strength, and unfortunately that's what's required now at United, and it does feel like he doesn't really fit. I think he probably knows he's got to be playing to keep his place in the England team, and also it's an issue for United because he's still the club captain. He got the armband when he came on Saturday, but he's clearly not. You can't have a captain that is fourth choice centre back. It's just not. It's not possible. And Ten Hag's mentioned a lot about team spirit and the dynamics in the dressing room, and you just wonder how that relationship's going to work when Fernandes is captaining him on the pitch every week. Maguire might be coming on for 2 minutes at the end and gets the armband. Who's giving the speeches in the dressing room? And there's far more to being a captain, especially this day and age, than just speaking to the referee and leading it on the pitch. There's the issues throughout the week, being the conduit between coaching staff and players. Is that Maguire? Is that Fernandes? It's going to become confusing, and I think it is unsustainable the way things are going. The embarrassing issue for United is they paid £80 million for him, and they'd probably be lucky to get 30 million at the moment. It's hard to see how another top six side would want him on this evidence. I still think beyond that, he's a very good Premier League defender. I think there's if Maguire was up for sale this summer, I imagine there's 12, 13 teams in the Premier League that would want to sign him, and that he would probably improve. He just doesn't
Tottenham's
really
team,
fit in at United.
Probably.
I don't think he probably would at the moment get in Tottenham's team, yeah. And I think the vast majority of sides outside of the top six, he would get in their teams. It's just not worked for United, and it's reached a point where it's clear to everyone it's not working, and you look at how comfortable he looks for England, and then comes back to United, and there just seems to be almost a mental block now about being at United, that he knows he's under so much pressure here that everything's being watched, and just feels like he needs a clean break. And I think it would be best for everyone if he departed in the summer. The issue for United, like I say, is getting a buyer for him. I mean, you could have a summer where they're trying to sell Wan-Bissaka and Maguire and getting maybe 45, 50 million maybe for the two of them, when they spent 135 million on them, 125 million on them 4 years ago. So, it's not a great look, but I think for many reasons it is unsustainable. And even just for the dressing room dynamics and that sort of situation, I think it's best for both parties, I think, that he moves on.
So we're looking ahead then to Bournemouth on Tuesday night. You've done the line today on the Manchester News that United could welcome back some players for the game. Scott McTominay, Lisandro Martinez and Diogo Dalot all back in contention to possibly feature, but that doesn't mean they all go into the lineup for the game. How do you handle the returning players sort of personally? Because they've got to maybe ease back in after a while without football, but Bournemouth at home is surely the type of game where you can afford to do that. But then on the flip side, is it fair to drop Wan-Bissaka? Is it fair to drop Luke Shaw for playing well in these roles?
Well, Shaw would obviously just switch to left back, you would have thought. I think Malasia's done all right in these 3 games that he started as well, and I suppose the bonus with him is that he didn't play at all for the Netherlands at the World Cup, so there was probably more of an element of risk bringing him straight back into the team than other players who had fulfilling playing time in Qatar. But he's a very good athlete, and he's shown that. With Shaw, he's England's best left back, and he's the best left back at United, so I don't think it's logical to persist with him at centre back, especially when they're going to be playing City next week now, isn't it? So that's not far off. You want Martinez to be ready for that game. He's been possibly United's best player this season, and he has to come back into the team at some point. I don't think it's strange how the World Cup can change the dynamic. I mean, Dalot's hamstring strain has given Wan-Bissaka a second chance this season, but there has to come a point where you do pick your best players again, and Dalot is the best right back at United, and this period, this 8-day period, we're speaking on the Monday, is very handy for United in that they've got 2 cup games, 2 eminently winnable cup games. I mean, they should be getting away with a reasonable rotation against Everton on Friday and Charlton on Tuesday. They have the bonus of that Charlton game being 5 days before the derby as well, which I think helps their preparations. They've got such good momentum going into this game against Bournemouth that I think to excessively rotate would be counterproductive. That you might look at Fred and think there's a temptation to bring him in because he played well when he came on at Molineux. He was certainly a lot more energetic than Eriksen, who's quite lacklustre. On the flip side, Eriksen, he's a technician, and if Bournemouth are quite stubborn to break down, he is someone that you want on the pitch to try and breach them, to try and pick the lock. So maybe the time to rest Eriksen or rotate Eriksen is against Everton on Friday or against Charlton certainly on the Tuesday. So, I mean, we've said before, Ten Hag doesn't really do weakened teams. The most rotation he's ever done was probably against Real Sociedad, and he still started 2 Brazil internationals in midfield. I think Ronaldo started that game, didn't he? Harry Maguire, the United captain, started that game. It was still an extremely strong side, and United only lost because of a pretty bad refereeing call on what was a very, very strange night because of the news that had emerged earlier in the day. It was like nobody cared afterwards, even though it did have, it could have major ramifications on United's season given that they didn't win that group. But really, I the way they have to see it is that this is another opportunity, as it was at the weekend, to play their strongest team. I think most people now looking at that squad would agree that although there were certainly drawbacks with some of the members of the front four, Anthony Fernandez, Rashford, Marshall is United's main first choice attacking quartet. Casemiro and Eriksen are the two best midfielders. Martinez and Varane are the two best defenders. Shaw, Dalot, De Gea. Clearly, although Dalot and Martinez had trained last week, it clearly wasn't enough. And I think with Dalot, you don't want to take that risk where he has just been out for 3 weeks with a hamstring strain. So I understand that. Maybe slightly more surprising that Martinez wasn't in the squad whatsoever. But bar Sancho, they're pretty much at full strength now, I think. And they need Sancho back, and they need him back in the form that he was in February and March last season, because he could have a huge role to play for United this season. There is a lack of quality and depth there, and Garnacho has already shown this season, more so as a substitute than as a starter, how impactful and how influential you can be off the bench, and that can get you into the team as he has done. So they do need Sancho back in sooner rather than later. I don't think he's going to be anywhere near the team or the squad for this Bournemouth game, but you would hope for his sake and United's sake he is available for selection against Everton or Charlton. Otherwise, if he's not coming in, if Ten Hag is not factoring into the selection for the Charlton game, a League One team, just the most ideal kind of opponent probably to ease him or reintegrate him into the squad, then there's going to be more suspicion about what's actually going on there, because then you're approaching 2 months since he went to the Netherlands to start training, and there has to come a point where the individual sessions end and he's back doing squad training, and he's actually doing what his job is, which is playing football at a competitive and regular level.
Ty, in terms of the team selections of Tuesday night then, we're all expecting Marcus Rashford to return to the lineup. For you, who does he come in and replace? Garnacho has been good off the bench. I thought he was poor again against Wolves, missed that chance in the first half. But there probably is argument to say Rashford should start through the middle, considering that Marshall, in the last 3 games I've watched him, has looked well off it as well.
Yeah, I didn't think Marshall had a great game on Saturday. I thought he was pretty average, really. I was quite quite keen to see what his impact would be like, because in sort of minimal minutes in the first half of the season, his contribution was excellent, but now he's got a run of starts. He's kind of struggling to back that up. But I would stick with the same front three. I thought Anthony was better at Molineux as well. Still not influencing games enough, but I think he did a lot better. He had that header that he was involved in creating with the ball to Garnacho, and just generally looked a lot more of a threat, got a lot of space as well. So I think I would stick with the same front three for now, and then got Everton and Charlton coming up at home as well. I think you can make changes then. The thing with Rashford is you could play him through the middle, but I think it's clear now he's at his best off the left, and at the moment he looks United's most threatening attacker, most likely goal scorer. So you want to play him in his best position for me, which I think is off the left, and I'm not sure it's a risk worth taking to move him and play Garnacho and Anthony on the wings and Rashford through the middle. I think I'd just keep Rashford where he is for now, and maybe look to rotate and make changes in the next 2 games. But you're right, the form of it's to United's benefit in a way that they're playing so well that certainly Anthony until Saturday had been pretty poor for 2 months now, maybe. I mean, even the start of his career, he got those 3 goals, but didn't influence those games that often. And he's had a very slow start, and actually made the comparison with Sancho last week that because United are winning games, there's no real spotlight on Anthony. Yeah. He's an £85 million winger who isn't playing particularly well, but it doesn't really matter because the team's winning. Sancho was a £73 million winger. He was underperforming in an underperforming team, and the pressure and the spotlight on Sancho was so much greater. And it's fortunate for Anthony in a way that he is being given this time to settle in, and the pressure's off because the rest of the team is performing so well. So yeah, in terms of the front three, I wouldn't make any changes for this game, especially not with the momentum they've built in the league, and the fact they could go third, they could go within the point of City. You've got a really tough game on Thursday, so I think I'd stick with that front three, which I think is United's best attack at the moment. But the form of Martial will become a concern if it continues through January for sure.
We keep on mentioning these cup games coming up as a chance for rotation. It's probably a shame that Martin Dubravka didn't stick around for another week. Samuel, he's gone back to Newcastle. I mean, I guess it's newsworthy to talk about, but such a strange situation there, and really odd that he was given those opportunities ahead of Tom Heaton earlier this season as well.
It certainly was. When United were in for Dubravka, it didn't make a lot of sense in that he seemed too high profile a goalkeeper to recruit on what was always going to be a backup basis at best. You could never be certain that he was going to be number two. And his status was inconsistent. I think when he first came in, he was number 3. Then Heaton, I don't know if Heaton had an injury or not, but then Dubravka was number 2. Then he was number 3 again. Then Heaton did have an injury in early November, and Dubravka got that opportunity against Villa. In Spain against Cadiz, he was pretty shaky in that game. Heaton had a very good half against Real Betis in the other friendly, and then Dubravka started against Burnley, and he was a danger to his own side. He's a goalie who I've never particularly rated. I was I was ribbing Stephen Ralston, our esteemed colleague, about this, how it was almost as if his reputation was enhanced by the little goldfish bowl that is Newcastle, and because he saved them a few points in a few big games, his form or his quality was overrated just by some enthusiastic Geordies, which I think there is an element of truth in. But whenever I watched him, he was always good for a clanger. I think Kieran Kelly, who, again, formerly of this parish, he used to say that he could make some good saves, but then, I don't know, after the 4th or 5th good save, he would drop an absolute dolly. And I think he did in the Euros as well, a pretty bad one where I think the ball went up in the air and he dropped it. It might have gone down as an own goal for him. So sometimes with goalkeeping signings, backup ones, it's very easy to just be immediately underwhelmed. When Sergio Romero signed for United, he was a free agent and he looked really, really dodgy at the World Cup in 2014. And Argentina do not produce good goalkeepers traditionally either. It turned out that he was as good a number 2 as you could ever come across, and that that knee injury he had restricts him to a certain number of games. He was happy being a number 2, and he was almost always a dependable number 2, helped United win the Europa League in 2017. But when it comes to judging goalkeepers, you just have to judge on who's the best one, and Heaton is a far better goalkeeper than Dubravka, and it just didn't make much sense to bring someone in who was essentially just competing with Heaton. I think someone at United actually referred to Dubravka as a top-class goalkeeper, and I don't think anyone in Newcastle would have ever referred to him as top-class. So, as I said, it was for a club that are really stockpiling goalkeepers, it was an odd move, and the 3 they've got at the moment are all technically still out of contract in the summer, so there are a few... One obviously important decision to be made there, although I think it's with David De Gea, if they've not got him tied down on a new contract before the summer, they'll just trigger his extension anyway. Heaton, I think, is worth keeping around, whether it's as a number 2 or a number 3 next season. I suppose the only stranger signing than Martin Dubravka would probably be Nathan Bishop, who's still at United nearly 3 years on, and as I said quite recently, I think Ty's had more games between the sticks at Old Trafford than he has, so I can't quite work that one out, and I've never been able to, but at least United are keeping clean sheets anyway, with and without Dubravka, I suppose.
Ty, January transfer window is open now. United fans will be in overdrive. There'll be lots of names linked as well in the gossip columns. United's still making it their priority to try and get an extra body in this month. As Samuel said at the start of the pod as well, that it might be someone in the Igalo mould in the fact that he just need an extra body where they can rest Marshall and have an extra option up front. For you, is there any standout name at this moment in time? And it's still very much looking like a loan option will be the most likely for United.
Yeah, I think, looking at the players available, I think the two for me that I think would add something and improve the squad and be good options would be Depay or João Felix. You're looking to sign a striker on loan in January. You're not going to get any better than Memphis Depay or João Felix, I don't think. And I know there's history with United and Depay, and Felix is probably going to be expensive, although that price might come down the later it goes in the window, depending if it goes anywhere else. Because I think his course is clearly run at Atletico Madrid. Beyond that, you're just not going to get a decent striker on loan in January, and you are going to end up with someone in the Igalo mode. I saw someone mention over the weekend that Ronaldo's gone to Al Nassr, and I think they've got Vincent Aboubakar as well, who might now be surplus to requirements, and he could go to United on loan. I mean, Depay or Felix would clearly be better options than that, and I don't think United would do any better than either of those two, really. And I know there's, you be careful to judge the mood of a fan base on Twitter, but every time Depay or Felix is mentioned, you get fans saying I don't want it to happen. But I'm not quite sure who fans are expecting if they don't want Depay or Felix on loan. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know.
Enzo Fernandez, by the looks of it, just repurposed.
Well, this is it. This is the fans who are transfer.
Let's buy a midfielder for 100 million. God.
Yeah, winning the transfer.
Buy a midfielder for 100 million who's worse than the one they spent 70 million on.
Yeah, exactly.
And plays in the same position.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think either of Depay or Felix by the end of the window, and I think you'd have to say that's a pretty reasonable result, really. I think both would certainly, it's a good compromise. They're going to be cheap enough options. It certainly wouldn't cost any more, shouldn't cost any more than the 16 million you've saved on Ronaldo's wages. Would clearly be competition for Martial, could play instead of Martial and contribute to a top 4 team. So I think either of those two would be decent signings by the end of the month, to be honest.
Samuel and I discussed this at the game the other week. What type of striker do you think they want, though? Because obviously they've had more success with a mobile option in Marshall, and they have that sort of fluid front three, worked wonders in pre-season, but hasn't been as successful in recent weeks. But do you not think that they need someone who's just a bit different up front, someone who is a bit more physical and a focal point?
Maybe, but I'm not sure it really matters.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Samuel.
No. I agree with that. I just think the way Ten Hag has spoken, it sounds like it has taken it on from just a forward to a striker, and he's spoken about the balance of the attack as well. And clearly, Rashford is better from the left. If Marshall gets injured, Rashford has to play there. Garnacho is always going to be inconsistent because of his age. Sancho is out of the picture. Elanga is not. I mean, I don't think he's really good enough for United. He can put in a shift, but he can't put the ball in the back of the net. And also, Everton want him. Pellistri is pretty much out of the picture because he's never been used. Antony only plays on the right. So when you weigh that up, it makes sense to go for someone who's going to be like backup or keeping Marshall on his toes. And look, if the striker takes Marshall's place, then who cares really? I think the interesting thing about this period of Marshall starting consecutive games is that they really miss out Martial, which they did in the start of the season when he was coming into games, he was contributing, he was doing well. But this consistent run has reminded everyone that he's not consistent and that you can't rely on him. And that's why they're going to sign a striker. So Marshall's always on borrowed time, really. Him and Rashford it's not a coincidence they thrived a few seasons ago when there was no Ibrahimovic, no Lukaku, no Cavani, no Ronaldo, no obvious front man that meant they were going to fade into the background. But with those two there as the main men, United are never going to be at the level they aspire to be, which is to be title challengers. So someone has to come in. So Marshall's nose is going to be put out of joint again. And that's his fault. When Cavani came in, everyone saw him because of the season Marshall just had as backup to Marshall. And in the end, he just took his place because he's a better striker and he wanted it more. And Marshall's not going to change. He's 27. And there were times during the Wolves game where Costa was putting more of a shift in. than Marshall was. And the coaches at United have said that they really rate Marshall's timing of his pressings, and that he does them at specific moments. And the more you think about it, you think, is that just them kind of like, is that face saving really? Is that them trying to, account for how lethargic he can look? And it is frustrating because Ten Hag sees him as a complete striker who's got the attributes, who's got the physicality, the pace, but you still don't quite believe him as a number 9. And this is his 8th season at United. I defy anyone to, come up with a name in United history who really started to turn it on as a striker in their 8th season and then maintained it onwards. It can't have ever happened. So that's why they're going to sign a striker. But I think your point, Rich, is a valid one, in that although that Ahmad's on loan, if Anthony is playing by default, and I think his position is always safeguarded because he's left-footed. But when he comes out of that team, whether it's mainly through injury this season, that attack the balance just goes out the window, because Fernandes has played on the right, Elanga's played on the right, doesn't look comfortable there. Rashford's actually done pretty well on the right in recent weeks for England and United, so that's maybe something they'd have to look at if that was to happen. But it's not an ideal situation. That's the thing. Although United are getting wins, and they're important wins, they do need that extra body. Makes it sound like they can just, I don't know, loan in Paul Mullin from Wrexham or something like that. Or maybe he could be an inspired deal. But they really do need some extra quality up there that's going to be going to at least keep the starting forwards on their toes.
I think. I was going to say that the interesting thing with Ten Hag at Ajax was that first great team, so to speak, that he had, the one that reached the Champions League semis. He had Tadic playing the full season as a false 9. I think the following season he had Klaus-Jan Huntelaar playing, who's probably more of a poacher, fox in the box. Then he signed Haller, who's a target man. So he didn't appear to be a manager who had a specific type of centre forward in mind. You think of someone like Mourinho. We know what kind of striker Mourinho wants. He wants a proper physical, dominating number 9, whereas Ten Hag doesn't seem that fussed really. So I don't. You're right. A target man or someone more physical would be a point of difference, but he doesn't strike me as the type of manager who's got a specific thought in mind. And I think, to go back to the 2 I mentioned, I think you're right about. The risk with Depay, I think, would probably be that it'd end up treading on Rashford's toes, and they'd operate in sort of similar positions. They both kind of like to come from the left or the inside left channel, but someone like Felix being used as a number 9 or as a false 9 and linking with Fernandes, I think would have a future for the rest of this season, and would certainly offer some improvements on Martial, arguably, or at least some decent competition.
Are you surprised that we've not seen more involvement of the young strikers? Hugel and McNeil, both 19 now. You'd expect maybe one of them to be there or thereabouts, at least getting maybe more of a chance than we've seen this season?
Not really. I think those two still look quite raw. McNeil's scoring record this season hasn't been particularly good, I don't think. Hugel, unfortunately, has had some injury issues that have certainly disrupted the momentum he had in his first season at United, when he was prolific. And I think he was doing some work experience at Forest Green last season, and he got injured and he was out for a while, so then he wasn't starting in the Youth Cup games, which was a pity, so he was reduced to more of a bit part role there. But neither of them look remotely ready for this level, and you wouldn't necessarily bank on either of them going out on loan this month. The under-21s have had it's not been a great season at all, really. I think they've had 1 win in the Premier League 2, and relegation's a very real prospect there, so you have to factor that in. But I don't think there's ever really been a compelling case for either of them to come in. I think you'd have to have a kind of like Rashford in February 2016 scenario, when literally every other striker known to man is unavailable.
Ty, in terms of other transfer business this month, then, can fans... we joked about Enzo Fernandez before, there's no way that's going to happen. Is there any other position you could see United strengthening if something appeared, or very much just striker-focused in terms of possible arrivals?
I think just striker-focused, really. I think probably a month ago, 3 weeks ago, would have said a right back, but Wan-Bissaka has done enough in these four games. 3 games, is it? He's done enough, I think, to prove that he can be decent competition / backup for Dalot. That you can wait until the summer now to assess your options at right back. I think I'm sure they'll want to sign another keeper. I mean, people at United were a bit non-committal about it yesterday, but I'd be amazed if they wanted to go through the rest of this season with Nathan Bishop as your number 3. I mean, I can't say I've checked this, but I would imagine every Premier League club, or certainly maybe 18 of the 20, have 3 experienced goalkeepers on their books now, and most clubs want a number 3 who is experienced enough to step in really if anything happens. Because talking, De Gea could get injured tomorrow night's game, and you're left with Tom Eaton as number 1 for the rest of the season. That might be manageable, but then you've got Nathan Bishop as number 2. Eaton gets a red card. Bishop's got to play 3 games. It's very easy for these things to escalate in terms of goalkeepers, and I think they will want a replacement for Dubravka in some shape or form, whether that's another loan move or maybe a free agent out there. But I don't think it will be exciting. I think in terms of exciting or decent deals, I think the only one for me would be a striker. I don't really see the need to do anything else in this window.
Is Romero
non-exciting goalkeepers? Are you up for it, Ty? Yeah, Romero's up at Boca, but Tyrone Marshall
do a job. Yeah,
City around the corner. You used to concede a few at home, so
I'll bring my boots on. You're there tomorrow, Rich, but I'll bring my boots on. I'll bring my boots and my gloves on Friday to the press box just in case.
We do indulge in this match. We mention it almost every week, don't we? That we play this media match.
We're using it as motivation to have a better performance and better result at the end of the season pitch game, hopefully.
Yeah. Anyone would think we'd won the amount we talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh well. You got to take these small victories, haven't you? Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us today on the Manchester is Red podcast. We will be back later in the week after the game against Bournemouth, and we'll look ahead to that match against Everton on Friday night. So Ty, Samuel, thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Rich.
Thanks, Rich.
And thank you very much wherever you are in the world. Again, a plug for the YouTube channel. Just search Manchester is Red podcast on there. You'll be able to watch the full episode with video as well. If you're new around here, please leave a like and subscribe, and we will see you again next time.